Hello, everyone, and welcome to the seventh episode of Adapt Revolution, your weekly antidote to hate, greed, and ableism, where the D word is disability. For our seventh episode, we are focusing on victory. What are the disabled victories that we claim on a daily basis? How do we build the world that we want? How do we see ourselves through every situation and see each other into more care, more tenderness, and more abundance every day? Here with us today is Said Shaiye, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and we'll get started with the episode.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Matt. I appreciate it. My name is Said Shaiye. Said Shaiye. Um, I am an autistic and ADHD author, professor, disability advocate, photographer as well. I I'm the author of Are You Bored Now, which was a Minnesota Book Award finalist in 2022. It is an experimental memoir that uses self-interview between myself and my inner child to explore the various traumas and experiences of my life. It retraces me and my family's journey from Somalia, where I was born shortly before the Civil War. When I was 3 years old, we moved to Kenya, and I grew up in the refugee camps for about 4 years in Otanga refugee camp and a few other ones. That's where both my younger brothers were born. After those 4 years, we moved to America in 1997 when I was 7 years old. Settled in Atlanta, lived there for a few years, and then moved to Seattle where I grew up. And that's the closest thing that I have to a home. Um, yeah, disability advocacy is super important to me. It's a big part of my life. I have only recently discovered of my own disabilities. I was diagnosed with autism and ADHD about 2 years ago. Um, Before that, I knew I had complex PTSD from, if you're born in a civil war, there's going to be some trauma. um, and Yeah, ever since then, it's just been super important to me first to understand what that means for me in my life and reframe the experiences that I've had. And then also looking at it from a communal perspective, realizing that there are a lot of people that that are unaware of their disabilities and their challenges and the ways that they could be living healthier lives for themselves. And so I use writing as one of the vehicles to do that. Advocacy in direct ways, um, telling someone that I suspect they're autistic is probably the most advocacy type of thing that I do, and I do it all the time. And that's how I found out about my being autistic, was someone telling me, "Hey, you're autistic." I didn't know what to make of it at first, but it turned out to be one of the best
Yeah,
and most important discoveries of my life. I'm very grateful for it, and I see it as a gift. So I'm very much encouraged to pass that along. Pass that gift along to others as well.
nice. I identify as neurodivergent as well. I haven't kind of done anything official around autism or anything, but I see my neurodivergence as a gift as well. So, um, welcome to the show. It's great to have you. Um, and I guess to get started, what is your what is your dream? What is your vision? You were talking earlier about world building, but um, how do we build the world that we want? And what are your dreams for the Adapt Revolution?
Wow, way to start off with the easy pitch. That's a big question. I love it though. I love those kinds of questions. I think you know um, my dream, ideally, to live in a world that didn't require me to change so much of myself just to survive it. To make so many self accommodations constantly, to have to walk out of rooms because they're too loud and they're too bright, even with my sunglasses on and my earplugs, ear protectors on, still overstimulated, and
Yeah.
being so overstimulated that I don't have conversation. I don't have words to tell people that it's, and feeling like an inconvenience for asking someone to turn off the fluorescent lights or close the blinds at 8 a.m. because it's too bright.
Yeah.
And just finding it easier to walk out of the room. You know, it's always been easier for me to walk out of the room, and now I'm starting to think about what does that do to me as a person on the inside. What, how many rooms am I walking out of within myself? And
Yeah. And
it's
and
hard.
what
You know, it's hard.
kind of rooms do we want to walk into? That's the question too,
Mm,
you know. What kind of rooms do we want to walk into? And how do we kind of layer ourselves in the richness of what it means to understand sensory abilities in um, a more lush and boundless perspective, you know?
mm,
Um, what kind of rooms do we want to walk into, That's
absolutely,
a question, I guess, that comes to mind for me, you know?
absolutely. It's I tend to only go into spaces that I am relatively sure I will have control over, and be able to modulate to meet my needs so that I can do what I need to do for as long as I need to do it. This limits my ability to interact with a lot of situations in this world.
Yeah,
As a writer, as a speaker, as a professor, those are challenges, exacerbated by the ADHD. But the challenges allow me to be creative in ways that I show up for myself, um, and allow myself to cherish and protect myself through the simple things that I do. Whether it's communicating ahead of time in an email because it'll be easier that way, or it's, if something is really bothering me, even though I hate speaking up and I hate, like, unless I'm performing poetry, I don't like being the center of attention. So I've never been comfortable asking for what I need. I grew up in a culture that, um, kind of prized being someone who said no, even if something was offered to them that they wanted, because it was the polite thing to do. And so that taught me to say no to everything, including myself.
mm,
And it's an important question of what spaces do we want to cultivate, what kinds of relationships do we want to cultivate in our lives that allow us to feel
yep,
like we can show up as our full selves at all times and not have to have this guard and this mask and this armor on that we're using to protect ourselves. It can be draining.
yeah,
I never answer your question.
yeah.
What is my biggest dream?
We. Oh yeah. What is your biggest
um,
dream? Go for it.
I think my biggest dream, currently, and I continue to refine my dreams as I get closer to them. It's honestly, to just live a life that's centered around not worrying about money first and foremost, having my needs and my family's and the people I care about's needs met, being able to do the things that I love, um, writing, speaking, talking about trauma and disability, um, traveling to do those things, going on wonderful writing retreats like the one I just left, which was a Black writing intensive focused on healing our trauma through writing. And it was the most beautiful weekend of just allowing ourselves to be ourselves, and to care for strangers and give ourselves a reprieve from the hardships and the challenges of navigating life in as Black artists in the often toxic spaces that we find ourselves in this
Yeah,
country, in this state, all that. So I think my dream is to just be able to live a life that allows me to be my happiest, fullest self, so that I can give the most that I can to others, because I've always loved helping people. And if you are not at your most resourceful self, if you're not at your best place, it's going to be hard to give anything more to the rest of the world because you don't even have enough to give yourself. So
yeah,
that would be one of my dreams, and just to help, honestly, help more people, um, more Black people discover their innate neurodivergence and learn how to reframe that as a positive and not a deficit. And specifically in the Somali community, because those are my people, and that's the cultural context that I have the strongest knowledge of, because that's what I grew up in. To allow my people to get to a place where we look at disability with less stigma and less shame. We look at things like mental health and neurodivergence with any type of divergence with less shame, with more accepting, with more coming to terms with, and I guess allowing, you know what I mean, using my story and my experiences as a bridge for other people who may or may not be Somali, who never suspected that they were neurodivergent or had a unknown disability, to go about the process of discovering that and allowing themselves to live live their fullest lives, and not feel shame about it. Shame is so, like, that's one thing I always go back to, because it's taking me a long time to work on that in all aspects of my life, but especially considering, like, just as an example, shaming myself for all the ways that I was not able to be culturally present. To be Somali means to be extroverted and outgoing and be at social events and go to weddings and show up for a friend's birthday and have family come over and sit with them talking for hours. I'm not built for that. I've never been built for that.
Mhm.
And there are so many
Yeah.
people that I know that don't have that capacity because their bodies and minds just don't work that way. And instead of trying to force ourselves to push past every limit that we know we have in the name of not being talked about and ostracized and not standing out in the wrong ways, just accepting ourselves, leaving when we need to, not going in the first place if we don't want to, going to our dark
Yeah.
room to recover and recharge and not feeling like I'm a broken person because I can't socialize like everyone else. And I'll never be able to work a 40-hour a week job in an office setting. Not because I'm broken, but because, brother, the fluorescent lights, the chit chat, the click clack noises, the water cooler talk, the small talk,
Yeah.
so much, the pressure
Way
of it.
too much. Yeah.
Sorry, that was a long-winded response.
No, thank you. Yeah, in the last episode we talked about the magic of disability. And we talked about that the magic of disability is really about centering care
Yeah,
at all times. And we talk about ourselves, able media. We talk about ourselves as tending to quality of life issues for people with disabilities.
mm,
And I believe that those of us who do have disabilities should be the ones setting the policies and the rules
yeah,
for the ways that the systems that support our lives are being run, and
absolutely,
we deserve to have creative control over those kinds of things, and
absolutely.
I think that that's what we're trying to encourage people to just get into the headspace, really being able to understand themselves, like you said, as full, complete, whole human beings that can have these lives that we can have these lives that we dream of, and we just have to tend to ourselves and each other in the process and really center care, Um, and so I'm wondering if, well, first of all, Beth, if you have any questions for Saeed,
Yeah.
if you have any questions, go ahead.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about alternative systems to case managers? Because many times they have let me down as of late,
Mm,
and before I used to trust them, like when I was a teenager, and then it
mm,
began to snowball after I was 18, and and I you know wish that there were alternatives, and
mm.
I want to have my own to turn to.
Yeah,
And I think we need to have that, much like people of color like having their own to turn to, as long as they're not like Clarence Thomas, or like, the, for example.
Yes.
I'm giving you
I love that so much.
thank you
Oh man.
mm,
So,
for the
that's
constant
an
beat up and tire.
right,
Mm,
right. And
uh,
so, it's because just because we have similarities or we share lived experiences doesn't mean that we have the same kind of hearts or views.
right. Hmm.
I think that that's a very important question. I personally have
Yeah.
never gone through that myself. I haven't had case management. I haven't been able to go through the various processes for getting some type of support from the county, from the state. I've tried so many
Right.
times, and eventually I just gave up. And I talk to friends who work in these spaces, and they
Certainly.
say that's kind of by design, like or friends who have disabled children, but they themselves are not disabled, and they work in like nonprofit work and social work, so they know how to do these kinds of forms. And they say we've been going after this for years, and they just keep putting more hoops in front of us. And I'm like, okay, so it's not just me not being able to do
Right.
it. There's a structural thing in place. But to answer your question, it is lacking in so many ways. My younger sister, she has Down syndrome and she has a case manager,
Mm,
and I've felt so bad about her situation, because she has not been getting services at all since she graduated high school. And she graduated high school about I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. She was supposed to
okay.
go to a
Whew.
vocational program after high school and do some type of work training and have some type of employment so that she would have something to do outside of the house and various activities and different stuff like that.
Certainly.
Nothing happened. Nothing happened. And part of the problem is, the bureaucracy of it. But I think there's a racial issue too, because they live in a small town. And I've
Certainly.
talked to lots of Somali families in small towns. I used to be a medical interpreter, traveled all over the state. And I've seen so much disparity between the kinds of services, not that it's perfect here in the Twin Cities, but the kinds of services and the kind of help and support
Oh
that
God.
people are able to get here versus out there. And it's just like they don't care. It's what it looks like in
No.
practice, whether they do or they don't. Like they're not putting in the effort. And there's so many people. I was just talking to the Somali mother the other day who didn't know that her kids qualified for waivers, that she should be getting help for all of the needs that her children have.
Yeah.
And she was like, "What is a waiver?" I'm like, "Do you have a case manager?" She's like, "Yeah, but they've never talked to me about that. You know how it is in these small towns." And I said, "I know exactly how it is in those small towns." So it is. It's definitely it's a system, just like many of the systems in this country, that is inadequate, ineffective, at worst harmful, at best negligent, and
Yeah.
it does not serve
Mm,
the people that it's designed to serve. But I'm
yeah.
not surprised by that in a country that just once again voted in so many ways to not allow student loans to be forgiven, and yet without even thinking about it, passing hundreds of millions and billions of dollars in new defense funding and new arms contracts for
Yeah.
random places selling,
I
donating
do.
arms here, selling arms there. And I'm like, what are we
Hmm.
really doing
Yeah.
here? You know what I mean? It's not a lack of
Yeah.
money, it's a lack
Right.
Yeah. That's
care,
bullshit.
a
It's not
priority,
money.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
so
It is.
it's definitely messed up. Just like it is almost impossible for someone with diagnosed disabilities to qualify for the service that they are legally entitled to, because of the
Right.
hoops that they have to jump through. Similarly, it is difficult for once they do get in that door and do get the case manager type services. Um, it's like on paper it looks good, but the reality and the practice of it,
Right.
as I've seen in various settings, yeah, it needs a lot of help. And I wish there were better alternatives, because just like how Black people, people of color, are the best people to understand each other's needs because they have the same experience, unless they're sitting a particular person who's sitting on the Supreme Court bench. Um,
Hmm.
this in the same way, disabled people are going to have the best lived experiences to be able to understand what we need. Even if we have different disabilities, we'll be able to empathize based on our own disability
Yeah.
experience and listen
I
and
agree.
give the person what they're asking for. It shouldn't be
Yeah.
so hard. And yet,
No. It's not rocket science.
Hmm.
yeah. So
Mm.
the panel discussion on the 7th, at the Wilder Center is being presented by LifeWorks, which is an organization that nonprofit organization that helps disabled people um, live their best lives in whatever way is feels best for them, whatever areas that they need support with. It's an
Yeah.
organization that helps disabled people and is dedicated to helping them um, help themselves and be advocates for
Nice.
themselves from a
Nice.
systemic perspective. And so the panel discussion itself in question is about DEI work, diversity, equity, and inclusion, but including disability in that conversation,
Yeah.
neurodivergence in that conversation, and different types of disabilities, whether they be physical, mental, or otherwise. And just looking at broadening the conversation about what inclusion means in today's world. With as much technology as we have and as many experiences as we've gained from the pandemic, that showed us that we can pivot our lives very quickly from you have to be there to do the work to okay, we can make it work online. Um, and all these
Yep.
assistive technologies that exist out there, automatic captioning technology that exists. Why are we leaving all of that progress behind and saying, well, pandemic is over, I guess. Let's go back to the old way immediately and forget about what happened the last few years. That was an aberration. It was just a blip on the radar. And I'm like, look, man, we we live in a world that is very difficult for everyone, but very much more difficult for some people than others. And I think that it's upon us, all of us, not just the people who are affected by the inequalities that exist in accessibility needs, accessibility to physical spaces, to processes, whether it's job searching, job applying, or it's engaging with social services, trying to get help. We all need to be better, especially the people who are in positions to make change about making this world a more just and equitable place for everybody. Period.
Yep.
Like full
Yep.
stop, without qualification. Reinforcing this idea that everyone is worthy of being loved without having to be anything, without having to do anything. That everyone is a worthy human being, just as they are, and that we are all unique beings in the history of humanity. There will be never, ever, ever be another person who is exactly like you. Ever. There hasn't been one and there never will be one. In all of the years that we've been alive as a species and all the people that have been born and passed on, there will never be another you. So regardless of your ability to produce capital for this system, your ability to work an office job, your ability to go be lucrative and start a business, real estate, well, I'm going to seminar, regardless of any of that stuff, you know what I mean? Whether you're struggling with addiction and homelessness and are just fighting to make a way for yourself, or you're struggling to keep the boat afloat because you're the only one in your family who is able to do some things and everyone else is depending on you. We are all worthy just as we are. And I think that's what really that inclusion thing means for me is that we're not, I shouldn't have to ask for my humanity to be recognized. It's inherently dehumanizing to be put in that position, to speak up for myself. They say a closed mouth don't get fed, but you should recognize that I'm a human and I need to eat. So why are you not giving me food without me having to ask
Yeah.
for it first? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's it is it is a strange world we live in. I'm grateful for the people that have helped me along the way, um, that have been kind to me, um, and that have shown me all the ways that I need to be kind to myself. Um, and I think it's exceedingly important for us, all of us, regardless of our situation or background, to be more open and honest with ourselves, um, to be better human beings, so that we can open our hearts and allow the experiences and the pain of other people to walk into those hearts, and to be moved by that and to be driven to action, and to help make this world a better place, even if it's just driving around. If you driving with a case of water bottles in there, even though plastic bottled water is bad for the environment, knowing that on hot days like this, there will be houses, people, unhoused people that are standing on the corner. And if you don't happen to have cash, pulling up on a 90-degree humid day and giving them a bottle of water, that's making the world a better place. That's making that person's life a better life, even if it's in just that brief interaction and with what little ability you had to affect their life. Just taking
Yeah.
small gestures to recognize each other's humanity, you know? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thanks.
Word.
All right. Well, thank you again
Thank
for giving us the interview today, and we're looking forward to seeing many of you on Wednesday, on June 7th at the event at the Wilder Foundation, and that's from
It's early, right?
7:30 a.m. to
Yep.
9:30 a.m.
Yeah.
Yep. Put on by LifeWorks, and yep. All right, Said. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
and
Thank you.
really great to meet you.
Likewise, thank you for having me and for giving me this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Yeah. Good to meet you too.
You take care.
You too. Bye.
All right. Bye now.